The following Radio Gunk broadcast deals with subjects that some viewers might find disturbing. It is intended for mature audiences only. And now, enjoy the show.
I do love that, I must confess. I think that's like the creepiest thing. So
creepy.
So greetings.
It's so creepy.
So creepy. So greetings, everyone. Welcome to part 4 of our lead up into Halloween. And we're doing another edition of Things That Go Gunk in the Night. And tonight we are focusing our attention on one Mr. Albert Fish. And yes, I see in the comment section that, you know, some of you are like, why are you doing Albert Fish? Everybody knows who Fish is. And you know what? I didn't know who Fish was. Like, I had no idea who he was. And I didn't know anything about him until I started to do a deep dive on him. And Xavier and I talked about, you know, whether we should do like a John Wayne Gacy or one of those people. But I wanted to go a little old school because these are the real creeps. These are really like the scariest people. And they thank you, Fudgicle, and they're just Ida, love
Ida,
you. By the way,
have.
Ida had a picture on her Instagram of her with like the prettiest shepherd, Xavier.
Shepherds.
Well, I don't think it was hers, but she was at somebody's house with like this beautiful, beautiful shepherd. Just really delicious.
Dirty syringe, what can't you hear?
I can't hear shit. I don't know what you're talking about. Anybody who's listening to us, let us know if there is some sort of...
Is there an issue? Can you not hear me?
Is there an issue?
Dirty syringe, you piece of yeah.
Okay, you have to let us know because we sound perfect to each other. So I kind of think that's all that matters. Oh, Sizzle Chest said all is good on Twitch.
Cool. Cool.
Just let us know on YouTube if we're having an issue or not, and we will fix ourselves.
Upgrade those My Little Pony headphones, buddy.
Can't hear you perfectly, or do you not hear us perfectly? Okay, see, Fudgicle said it sounds good to her. She's on YouTube, so we're good.
C'est la vie.
Yeah, so I braided my hair today because I didn't wash it, and then all of a sudden it was time to go online, so I thought I would just throw it into braids. All right. Stop it. I hate when you do that. Okay, so we're going to talk about Albert Fish tonight, who is known as the Gray Man. He's also known as the Werewolf of Wysteria. He's also known as the Brooklyn Vampire. And he's also known as the Boogeyman. And
middle name was Howard, by the way.
Figures.
Yeah, figures. So there we go.
And he was listed as the most horrible criminal in American history. You should also know that Hannibal Lechter is loosely based on him. And I know we're not tying into what we did last week, but he is, in fact, you know, he kind of liked to chomp on on some baby butt. So there's that.
Hamilton Howard Albert Fish, born May 19th, 1870.
Oh, God.
A minute ago. In Washington,
well, that's
DC.
before my time.
Oh, I don't know. Well, I'm just saying that we share the same grade books. So.
All right, give us his history, babe.
Well, he was born to a father who was 75 years old at the time. His father was roughly 40-something years older than his mother.
43 years older.
Yeah, and his father died when he was 5 years old, and him, along with some of his siblings, with his siblings, went to go live at an orphanage. And what is more cliche than living in an orphanage at the turn of the century? That is his.
That's as hellish as it gets.
Yeah, exactly.
It's the stuff nightmares are made of.
When he was a young lad of 5, he sang in the choir at the orphanage, which he received.
That's because some old guy was like squeezing his fucking balls as hard as can possibly be.
He apparently was mercilessly beaten at that age, which leads us to the beginning of his decrepit, sordid existence. Apparently, while receiving these beatings in the orphanage, halfway through the beatings, he would, as best described, he would get an erection, which led to even worse ridicule and more beatings. But that he found that he would become sexually excited getting beaten. And physical pain brought him sexual excitement.
Well, let me go back just a snurch. His original name was Hamilton Fish, and he was said to be named after a distant relative named Hamilton Fish, who was a 16th governor of New York from... Stop it. I hate when you do that and you know it.
Sorry.
And then he was a United States Senator from New York from 51 to 57. And then he was the Secretary of State from 69 to 77. And to be precise, his father was 43 years older than his mother.
Dang.
Yes. And then the beatings would often give him erections. And the other orphans used to tease him about the fact that they gave him erections. And they used to call him ham and eggs at the orphanage. Not necessarily sure why that is, but nonetheless, there it is. Thank you, Shane, so much for contributing.
Keep in mind, this is like a 5-6-year-old kid.
Yes, exactly.
So it's not, you're not talking about some dirty, like, 14-year-old teenager that's been watching the Playboy Channel Scramble Signal back then.
Yeah.
This is literally a 5-6-year-old kid who just... the freaking nightmare of living in an orphanage. Just
Can you imagine what it must have been like living in an orphanage back then? Like, seriously.
Can't imagine.
No, I can't imagine today, let alone back in the fucking day when they didn't give a shit about kids.
Yeah.
You know, you were just disposable. There were so many...
There's barely labor laws back then.
Well, there were so many homeless kids on the streets and shit like that. And, you know, Albert Fish clearly, as we go forward in time, knew this and used that to his advantage as he started his incredible descent into fucking madness. In 1879, his mother got a government job, and so she was finally able to take him out of the orphanage. But it was a little bit too late for him. At the age of 12, he started having a sexual relationship with
can we
another
rewind
boy.
it back to real quick? At the age of 11, Mr. Fish fell out of a cherry tree, as cliche as that might sound, and ended up with a horrific concussion, which left him with a stutter for the rest of his life and pretty much constant headaches from that day forward.
Wah.
So they're
Feel so
saying
bad
that,
for him.
So they're saying that head injury, while it probably didn't totally turn him into a creep, it definitely didn't help.
Yeah, okay. So after his mom took him out and he started having this homosexual relationship at 12 years old.
Ooga.
Apparently the other boy that he was having this relationship with was also a little bit of a social deviant. I know, I'm looking at Shane's comment. Anthony Cumia will soon be trying to hook up with girls 43 years younger.
I thought you did.
Yeah, exactly. Too late. So he started doing really, really weird things, such as drinking urine, and
With his 12-year-old butt buddy.
with his pole fancy.
And one
boy.
of the things that they ended up doing, I believe the boy was a telegraph, worked in telegraphs at the time.
Yeah.
They ended up going to a museum, which was featuring one of these anatomy displays, like going the human body. And one of the exhibits was,
I think I went to that.
yeah, it's one of those like they have now, but the
I was
19
fascinated by Chinese
the
slave workers.
early 1900s version of that. So one of the exhibits was a cross section of a human penis, and apparently that checked the box
A human
for him.
penis?
A human penis, as opposed to those horse ones.
Yeah.
And he became really fascinated with slicing into penises, which led to later to him doing all course of just perverse, bizarre things with his own genitalia.
Wait, but before we get to that, I wanted to talk about him drinking urine, but he also used to
that's what
eat the poo-poo. He used to eat the
That's what
poo-poo.
this telegraph kid introduced him to all that.
Eat the poo-poo.
You have a screw and a nut instead of a screw and a screw.
Eat the poo-poo.
He
yeah.
Yeah, it's called like the bodies exhibit, but I don't
Yes,
think it's
thank
the
you.
same.
I was thinking of that.
I don't think that's the same one that they went to,
But
anyway, so
let's
this
go with it. Let's go
so
with it.
this kid, this other young man that he was having a sexual rendezvous with, he introduced him to drinking urine, eating feces, and doing weird things to genitalia.
Which is actually, hold on, the act of eating feces is called, all right, I'm going to try and pronounce this if I can find it. Cropophagia.
Oh, really?
Cropophagia. Fucking fabulous word.
I remember the time my friend showed me the two girls in a cup video, and I had no idea what I was watching.
Oh
I was
my
like,
God, it's pudding, for God's sakes. That's
I-
kind of
well,
like
Listen, I don't know. I
that's
just know-
kind of like eating the monkey brain
We're
in
talking about-
Faces of Death. It's the
We're
same
talking
shit.
about like 10 years ago.
Yeah, it's still the same
back in the
shit.
day.
Don't you remember the monkey brain eating thing, Faces of Death?
Yeah.
And how you had to like look away and kind of go like this? It's the same thing. Two girls, one cup, Jello pudding. That's it. I'm sticking with
Okay,
that.
well, I didn't. You weren't around 10 years ago to tell me these things, were you?
Oh, as if you would have paid attention to me. You still don't pay attention to me, so stop it right now.
Touche.
Okay. Okay. So then,
I think we
in
lost
18
the entire crowd, by the way.
I know. Eat the poopy.
This girl stopped.
Okay, move along. Why that says. Okay.
Soft
In 1890,
serve ice cream.
in 1890, Fish arrived in New York City.
Tiger
And,
Lily, that's disgusting.
okay, she's eating, but that's not my problem. And I already poured, so there's that. In 1890, he arrived in New York City and became a male prostitute to make a living. At the time, he also started to rape young boys, and that's something he just continued to do even after his mother arranged a marriage for him. Quote from Mr. Fish, I got an apartment and brought my mother up from Washington, D.C., which is where they lived. We lived at 76 West 101st Street, and that's where I met my wife. He was married to her in 1898. She was 9 years younger.
It was an arranged marriage, too.
They had 6 children.
Oh.
Albert, Anna, Gertrude, Eugene, John, and Henry Fish. Throughout
Gertrude.
1898, he worked as
That's
a
a
house
crime right
painter.
there.
And he said, right, Chloe, Kim, Kylie.
Yeah, exactly.
He worked
Fishing
as a
up
house
with the
painter.
fishes.
Exactly. Can you imagine? Daddy, what you eating there? Ice cream for everyone?
Yeah.
Throughout 1898, he worked as a house painter. He was molesting children, yet he never touched his own children. And even according to the children themselves, when they had to testify at his trial, said that he had never touched them. But yet he was, he did kind of weird and strange things that made one wonder. Oh my God, we have a video component to this. What's wrong with us?
Do.
Hold on one second. Let me add to stream. Okay, Albert Fish, known as the Gray Man. So here we go. So here's Albert Fish, a nice, young, innocent boy. And this is him in, he was arrested for embezzlement and was sentenced to incarceration at Sing Sing.
I think it's when he auditioned for the Monopoly guy. and
In
didn't get the-
1903,
and didn't get
Mr.
the role.
Moneybags, right. He regularly had sex with men while he was in prison. I'm sure he loved that.
Oh, yeah.
In January 1917, his wife left him for a handyman who used to board with the Fish family. And that bitch left him with all the kids. All 6 fucking kids were left with this reprobate. Quote, Mr. Fish, she took all the furniture and didn't even leave a mattress for the children to sleep on. You know who that's very reminiscent of? That fucking Christy Brinkley, because I
Really?
knew people who knew Billy Joel at the time, and when Christy Brinkley left Billy Joel, who was a rampant idiot alcoholic, apparently she left him with literally nothing in his gigantic fucking Hamptons house. All she left him with was like his mattress and his piano. She took absolutely everything that wasn't fucking nailed down. So yeah, Mrs. Fish,
I guess he
Christy
ain't so
Brinkley
tough.
of 1890.
I guess he ain't so tough because he's falling for an uptown girl.
Yes, that's exactly right. Okay, so after he was arrested and then his wife left him a couple of years later, he started to hear voices. So much so that he would get naked and he would wrap himself up in the carpet and say that he was following the instructions of John the Apostle.
John the Apostle.
So after he was arrested and then was released,
Was it Stuttering John the Apostle?
What?
Stuttering John the Apostle?
Stuttering John the Apostle, exactly. So there were a couple of early attacks and attempted abductions that aren't really part of who he is because they, kind of like the guy that we discussed last week, they decided let's get him on the one that we know that he did. And everything else, even though he admitted to it, they didn't try him for it because they were like, "Fuck it, we're just gonna send him to electric chair." So there was no specific ritual that Fish followed when he had victims. The recurring theme was that he would rape the boys and never the girls. The only similarities between all his known cases was that he ate them in the end, and he killed all of his victims differently. So what you're seeing right now is a picture of lovely little Thomas Kedden. In 1910, Fish met, sorry, that's not little Thomas Kedden. I'll get back to him. I'm sorry. Let me give you a couple of people before I get there. Hustle Apostle. That's very funny.
Why do you post that your picture of Fatty Arbuckle?
I know. Okay, let me start with Thomas Kedden.
Yeah,
in 1910, Fish met a 19-year-old boy named Thomas Kedden. The two men began a cruel and abusive relationship. Kedden was, according to Fish, intellectually disabled. Kedden would have been unable to consent to any of the activity that took place. 10 days after the two met, Fish took Kedden back to a farmhouse and proceeded to torture him for 2 weeks. When Fish was done with the boy, he proceeded to cut half his penis off. Well, going back to,
Jeez.
what he enjoyed at the fucking museum. Fish recalled, "I will never forget his scream or the look that he gave me." Fish had met the boy in Delaware, and he was tempted to kill him and cut his body up and bring the remains home with him, but he decided not to do it because it was really too hot outside and he would have smelled, and it would have drawn too much attention. So he cleaned and bandaged his half-amputated penis. He gave him $10 and went back home alone. So Fish also had certain devices he used when torturing his victims, which he liked to call his implements of hell, which involved a meat cleaver, a butcher's knife, and a handsaw. So let's go on to young Beatrice Keel. Beatrice Keel was a young girl who caught Fish's eye on July 11th of 1924. He saw her playing at her parents' farm. He would basically lured the victims away with food. Everybody was fucking starving and poor back then. He told young Beatrice that he would give her money if she helped him find some rhubarb. Okay. Wow. She was about to leave when her mother stopped her from leaving and chased Fish off the property. He then returned to their residence and tried to sleep in their farm, and Beatrice's father found him and forced him to leave. So let's put that on the side for now, and we'll come back to it. But here we have lovely little Frances Mcdonald. In the same month, 8-year-old Frances Mcdonald was reported missing to his parents. 8-year-old Frances was playing in the front porch of his home in Staten Island, and his mother was basically nursing his baby sister at the time. And she saw this guy, and he was like really shabby and kind of looked like old and really decrepit. And all she remembered about him is that he was just like clenching and unclenching his fists. And he was just standing there staring at the boys playing ball and just like clenching and clenching, clenching and clenching like that. And she's like, God, what's up with that guy? He tipped his hat to her and then disappeared. Later that afternoon, he was seen again watching Frances and 4 other boys when they were playing ball. And he called Frances over to him. The other boys continued to play ball. A few minutes later, Frances is gone. A neighbor noticed that the boy that looked like Frances walking that afternoon in the wooded area with an elderly gray-haired guy behind him. So parents kind of freaked out, and they started to search for him after he missed dinner. His father happened to have been a policeman and started a search for him. They found the boy in the woods under some branches. He had been, as you can possibly imagine, horribly treated. His clothes had been torn from his body. He had been strangled with his suspenders. He had been beaten so badly that police doubted that that old guy could possibly have done this. The beating was so severe that they thought he must have had an accomplice in order to, do something as horrible as that. That's when they dubbed him the Gray Man because of his old appearance. Years later, when Fish was arrested for the murder of Grace Budd, which we'll get to in a second, he never admitted to the crimes, but then he finally confessed that he did murder and rape the boy, and he did intend on castrating him because of his fascination with penises, but he didn't get around to it. Go, babe. Sorry, you're up.
The suspenders were so tight around his neck that literally, like, it wasn't for the different coloration. It was literally this embedded into his neck, where it was literally flush with the rest of his neck. That's how tight he choked him.
Dory Morgan, the old help me find rhubarb trick.
Yes. Come with me. I have a potato.
All right, let me scroll a little bit from here. That's poor little Francis. And then we come to poor little Gracie Budd. Gracie Budd ultimately would be the downfall of Albert Fish, because Gracie Budd was really a horrific story at the time, and it was in the newspapers for months and months after she went missing. So you want to start off with Gracie and tell us a little bit about her?
Well, in May 25th.
Or not.
No, May 25th,
Okay.
1928, Albert Fish read an ad in the paper that posted by a young man named Edward Budd. And then he decided that
Gracie's brother.
Yes, that he would murder Budd. Fish, by then an accomplished rapist and murderer, visited Budd's family under the pretense of offering the man a job. But when he met the 10-year-old sister Grace, Fish decided to change his intended victim. The following is a letter Fish sent anonymously to Grace Budd's
Oh, no.
mother.
You got to wait on that. You got to wait on that just a little bit.
Okay.
Just a little bit. Only because let me just give you a little bit more background on what happened to poor Gracie. So basically, Albert Fish answered this ad from her 18-year-old brother who wanted to get out of the city, which, basically was a filthy shithole at the time, and wanted to work as a farmhand. So Albert came to the door, as said he was another man's name. He introduced himself as Frank Howard, and he came in and introduced himself to the family and said, Edward, you're a fine young man. I would love to have you on my farm. And, I lost one of my farm hands. And so, I'm really looking for somebody else. And, I'll pay you, I don't know, let's go with $10 a month or some shit like this. So Edward's like thrilled. And his friend was with him, and he's like, I'll take your friend too. And, his whole plan was that he was just going to, destroy Edward. But then Gracie comes, traipsing through the door. She had just come back from church, and she was dressed in her Sunday finest. And by everybody's account, she was like an adorable little girl. And at that moment, he decided, that's the one I want. Fuck Edward. Let me go with Gracie. And so he came back like the next week, bringing some porridge or some yogurt and some fresh fruit that he said came from the farm. And they sat down to lunch. They asked him to stay. And, they're talking about Edward leaving and how that's going to be and whatever. And he said, great, I'll pick Edward up probably tomorrow or the next day so that he can come upstate with me. And then he's walking out the door. And he's like, I happen to be going to my sister's home right now. And, if Gracie would like to come, I would love to have her join me at my sister's daughter's birthday party. And the family kind of looked at each other and they were like, I'm not really sure that we want to do that. But you know what? Gracie really never gets to get out of the house. Maybe it'll be good for her. And this is like the second time they've met him. So they're like, well, he's an old man. What's he going to do? He owns a farm. He's wealthy. He's taking our son. So let Gracie go with him to this home.
What's he gonna do? Eat her?
Exactly. So Gracie leaves with him and she's so excited to be out of the house and going to do something fun. So again, she's dressed in her finest. What you're looking at right now is the missing persons police thing that went out to everybody at the time. And he left with her and he bought himself a round trip ticket and he bought her a one-way ticket up to Westchester. To an abandoned home called Wysteria Place or something like this.
Yes.
And while Gracie was outside picking flowers, he was inside and he got naked and decided, at that moment that he's going to torture Gracie. And I guess, do we want to come back to what he did to Gracie? Because it's just really so fucked up.
After she went
because I want to
missing-
read the letter, and I want you to read the letter, but that's 6 years later. Just don't forget.
Well,
So here's poor little Gracie.
It reminisces.
Yes,
By the way,
here's poor
look-
Gracie.
Doesn't Gracie look like a young Sacha Baron Cohen?
She's so cute. Last seen wearing a white felt hat, blue streamer in back, hair dark, straight bobbed, eyes blue. Complexion sallow, physical condition anemic. Last seen wearing a pink rose here. Last seen wearing a gray overcoat. Last seen carrying brown pocketbook. Last seen wearing white silk dress. Last seen wearing white silk socks. Last seen wearing white shoes. Age 10. Weight 60 pounds.
I like how
So-
they point to socks.
There's our
In
little
case you didn't know what socks were. back
Gracie.
then.
We're going to come back to Gracie in a moment because 6 years basically go by
Yes.
where the police are searching for her. They know that this, old man took her, but so many people looked like an Albert Fish, and they never kind of put together that the gray man who stole and killed that child on Staten Island would even be remotely close to who this person was. So we're going to come back to that. The worst thing that Police Lieutenant Samuel Dribbin said to the Buds was that the address for Frank Howard, which is the name he gave them, was fictitious. The kindly old man was a fraud. There was no Frank Howard, no farm in Farmingdale, Long Island. None of it was true. On June 7th, New York police mailed out 1,000 flyers to police stations throughout the country with a photo of Gracie and that description that I just showed you, and a description of Mr. Howard. This activity, along with the local publicity, guaranteed an epidemic of Gracie sightings and crank letters. Each of them were thoroughly investigated. There were 20 detectives on the case. Nothing happened. There were a couple of solid clues. Police found the Western Union office in Manhattan where Frank Howard sent his message to the Buds, plus the original handwritten message. From the writing and the grammar, it was clear that Howard had some education and refinement. Police also located the pushcart where Howard had bought the pot cheese that he said was from the farm that he had given to the Buds. Both of the addresses in East Harlem were a focal point of the search, but it was all fruitless. So now, before we even get to what happened to Grace, we're going to talk about Billy Gaffney for a moment. So this is poor little Billy Gaffney. Hold on, I'm going to go back a little bit, sorry. So this is Billy Gaffney. The year before Gracie went missing, in 1927, 4-year-old Billy Gaffney was playing in the hallway outside his apartment with his 3-year-old neighbor. And a 12-year-old was babysitting them, and he was also babysitting his baby sister at the same time. And the little baby started crying, so he went into the apartment, and he came back out, and Billy was gone. And so the little boy that he was playing with wound up being on the roof, and they said, well, where's Billy Gaffney? And the little boy said the Boogeyman took him. So the next day, again, a bunch of detectives went out to investigate, and, they went and looked in the Gowanus Canal, which is that stinky hellhole. And they organized a search. They dredged the Gowanus, no sign of Billy. So they really started to kind of investigate the 3-year-old. And they're like, okay, can you tell us a little bit more about him? Can you tell us anything about him? And all they could say was that he was like an old guy with gray hair and a gray mustache. And they never connected it to the gray man. So, let's put Billy on the back burner for a hot moment. I'm going to move forward a little bit now. Okay. And Xavier, you're up in a moment, but let me just do a little bit about the manhunt for Albert. In a short period of time, Manhattan fingerprint experts and police photographers were enlisted in the case, as well as 250 plainclothesmen. Huge manhunt. And, there was Billy missing, there was Grace missing, there was that kid dead in Staten Island, all sorts of shit going on. The woman who was the mother of the kid who was missing in Staten Island said, this old man came shuffling down the street, mumbling to himself, and I'll never forget those hands. I shuddered when I looked at him, how they opened and shut, opened and shut, opened and shut. And I saw him looking at Francis, and I saw him looking at the other boys, and I saw his gray hair and his drooping gray mustache, and there's nothing about him I will ever forget. If I ever see him again, I will never forget that face. But you know what? He had disappeared into thin air. And so we're going to cut to 6 years later. Gracie's now missing for 6 years. It's 1934. The case is still open, but nobody expected it to be solved. So what the cops would do is every once in a while they would leak something to newspapers. And Walter Winchell, who was a very prolific author and writer in the newspapers at the time, said something like, I checked in on the Grace Budd mystery, and she was 8 when she was kidnapped about 6 years ago, and it's safe to tell you that the Department of Missing Persons will break this case. They're expected to in the next few weeks. So cut to 10 days later, where I guess Albert Fish read that they were about to break this case, and Delia Budd, Grace's mother, gets a letter in the mail.
My dear Miss Budd, it is 1894. A friend of mine shipped as a deckhand in the steamer Tacoma Captain John Davis. They sailed from San Francisco to Hong Kong. On arrival, he and his others went ashore and got drunk. When they returned, the boat was gone. At the time, there was a famine in China. Meat of any kind was $1 to $3 a pound. So great was the suffering among the very poor that all children under 12 were sold for food in order to keep others from starving. A boy or a girl under 14 was not safe in the streets. You could go in any shop and ask for steak, chops, or stew meat. Part of the naked body of a boy or girl would be brought out, and just what you wanted to cut from it. A boy or a girl's behind, which was the sweetest part of the body, and is sold as veal cutlets, bringing the highest price. John stayed there so long that he acquired a taste for human meat. On his return to New York, he stole 2 boys, one 7, one 11. He took them to his home, stripped them naked, tied them, and burned everything that they had on. Several times every day and night, he spanked them, tortured them, to make their meat good and tender.
Is that like Kobe beef, kind of?
First, he killed the 11-year-old boy because he had the fattest ass and, of course, the most meat on it. Every part of the body was cooked and eaten except for the head, bones, and guts. He was roasted in the oven, boiled, broiled, fried, and stewed. The little boy was next, and he went on the same way. At the time, I was living at 409 East 100th Street. He told me so often how good human flesh was. I made up my mind to taste it. On June 3rd, 1928, I called you at 406 West 15th Street and brought you a pot, cheese, strawberries. We had lunch. Grace sat on my lap and kissed me. I made up my mind to eat her. Under pretense of taking her to a party, you said yes. She could go. I took her to an empty house in Westchester I had already picked out. When we got there, I told her to remain outside. She picked wildflowers. I went upstairs and stripped all my clothes off. I knew I did not want blood on them. When all was ready, I went to the window and I called her. Then I hid in the closet until she was in the room. When she saw me all naked, she began to cry and tried to run down the stairs. I grabbed her, and she said she would tell Mama. First, I stripped her naked. How she kicked, bit, and scratched. I choked her to death, then cut her into small pieces so I could take the meat to my rooms, cook it, and eat it. How sweet and tender the little ass, and roast it in the oven. It took me 9 days to eat the entire body. I did not fuck her, though I could have. I wished she died a virgin.
Fuck me. Fuck me. Okay? So, I don't know if it tasted like chicken, Ida. Jesus. Yeah, so imagine, Delia Budd, who was illiterate, got this letter, and she had her son, who was like 19 at this point, or 20, whatever, read it to her. And imagine what she was thinking when she read this. So the weird thing about it is that, like with all killers, they just want to be noticed. They just want to be loved. And so, of course, he wrote this letter to her, so proud of himself, not realizing, however, that on the letter itself, there was like some details that were,
there was an acronym for like architects of there were custom made envelopes for a group of people that
right, hexagonal emblem with the letters NYPCBA, which stood for the New York Private Chauffeurs Benevolent Association. With the cooperation of the President Association, an emergency meeting of the members was held. Police checked the handwritten membership forms, looking for handwriting similar to Frank Howard's, which was what was at the what's the teletype office? Western Union office.
Western Union, yes.
So a young janitor came forward admitting that he had taken a couple of sheets of paper. He had stolen them basically from the union office, and he left the stationery in an old rooming house at 200 East 52nd Street, which, by the way, is literally a block away from where I lived, and I'm dying to know what building that was. The landlady was shocked when she was given Frank Howard's description. He sounded just like the old man who had lived there for the last 2 months. The old man had checked out of the rooming house just a couple of days earlier. However, he was expecting a letter from one of his older sons, because the son was who would give him money in order to survive, right?
Yes, one of his sons would financially contribute to him on a regular basis, to the extent that the landlady was aware that he received mail on a regular basis, which is essentially was money sent to him, I believe a check or something like that. Right.
So he had been waiting for that to come. While I'm here, I just wanted to show you guys that this is the house that he had taken poor little Gracie to. With the unsuspecting Gracie in tow, he stopped back at a newsstand to pick up a bundle before taking the train to the Bronx and then to the village of Worthington in Westchester. For Grace, he only bought a one-way ticket. Grace was enthralled with the 40-minute ride to the countryside. Only twice in her life had she ever been out of the city. This was a wonderful treat for her. At the station in Worthington, Fish was so absorbed in his monstrous plan that he left his bundle of tools on the train. Poor little Grace noticed and reminded him to bring the package. They walked along a remote road until they reached an abandoned 2-story building called Wysteria Cottage in the midst of a wooded area. Okay, so this is Wysteria Cottage. This is where he wound up taking Grace. And I just found it kind of amazing, which you're going to see in a second. A fucking dog is scratching on the door. This is Wysteria Cottage today, and it was just sold about 3 years ago for like $950,000 or something like that. And it kind of amazes me that this home where he basically decapitated and tortured people would actually still be around, and it is totally a fixer-upper. I don't know what it looks like inside. Weirdly enough, when you see pictures of homes that are for sale and stuff like that, there's always some little hint of like what it looks like inside and things like that. And there's nothing to be had online about this house other than it's where, Albert Fish killed Gracie Budd. That's basically all it's known for. So I'm pretty sure unsuspecting people purchased this house. It's just kind of crazy. Okay, yeah. So it sold for just under $1 million about 3 years ago.
$1 million for that. Wow.
Yeah, while Grace entertained herself outside with various wildflowers, Fish went upstairs. He got naked. He did all that shit. Okay, yeah. So, so then the police came to... No, Gein's house was not demolished. It was burned. Don't you remember? So they started looking for any signs of Grace. They were digging all over the property there, and then finally found poor Gracie's little skull. And finally were able to put to rest. I know, the house is just like frightening. Tiger Lily is just horrible. So basically, Albert Fish took them there, and he, according to the detectives that were there, he was completely devoid of any emotion at all. That night at 10 p.m., Fish was interrogated by the assistant district attorney, and he asked Fish why he murdered Gracie. He explained that he had sort of a bloodthirst, and it had overwhelmed him. Once it was done, he was overcome with sorrow. He said, "I would have given my life within a half hour after I had done it to restore it to her." He asked Fish if he raped Gracie, and Fish was adamant that it never even entered his head to do something like that. I think I lost Xavier, by the way. Nothing was asked of him at the time, or was anything volunteered about the cannibalism mentioned in Fish's letter to the Budds. The police may have considered it too insane to be true, or perhaps they were already thinking that including horrible details about cannibalism would bolster the inevitable defense case for insanity. And that's exactly what they didn't want. They didn't want him to be known as being insane because, they just wanted to nail this guy to the fucking wall. So yeah, that night after the capture of Albert Fish had leaked to the newspapers and reporters, they descended on the Budd apartment with the news. Shortly afterwards, Detective King drove Mr. Budd and his son Edward to the police station to identify Fish as the man who had come to their house. Edward did more than identify Fish. Totally now lost Xavier and my movie. Edward did more than identify Fish. He threw himself at the old man. He said, "You old bastard, you dirty son of a bitch, you killed my daughter." Mr. Budd was surprised at Fish's lack of emotion. He said, "Don't you know me?" to the old man. And yes, Fish answered. He said, "You're Mr. Budd." And he said, you're the man who came to my home as a guest and took my little girl away." And he just walked away crying. "Hi, sweetheart, I lost you."
Yeah, I did a oopsies.
You did an oopsie. I need my film back. I was in the
oopsies.
middle of having a little film time.
It was like 50 seconds.
You left me on my own to have to fend for myself.
Yes, OJ's Brentwood house was torn down. Essentially,
Oh, was it? I didn't know that.
yes, yeah, oh yeah, absolutely. It was
Absolutely. I don't
same
know.
thing with Nicole.
You just saw that fucking creep fest house that somebody chose to keep there for like
Jeffrey
over 100
Dahmer's-
years.
The Jeffrey Dahmer's place was torn down. Essentially, all these places end up just being demolished, as well as they should be.
Yeah, no shit. Although the Amityville Horror House is still up. We're actually going to do a show about like creepy houses. Sweetheart, can you put back up the
Absolutely.
video component?
That would be
Please.
a good idea. Yes, I
Please,
forgot
sir.
that was. Oui, CC.
Please, sir.
Ask and you shall receive.
Yes, I did say it's like Kobe beef. Because they would like beat the... Yeah, okay. I know it was really fucked up of me. I'm sorry. I'm going to add the video back to the stream. And I'm going to just like zhuzh a little bit forward so that we can get past the house that is miraculously still there. And poor little Gracie Bud's skull that is right there. Let's see what the next clip is. All right, now we're back to Billy Gaffney. Just for a hot minute. Albert Fish was facing indictment in Manhattan and Westchester County. First, Westchester County indicted him on a charge of first-degree murder, while Manhattan was preparing an indictment for kidnapping. Meanwhile, police got a major break. A motorman on a trolley, my grandfather was a trolley driver in Brooklyn, just so you know, saw a picture of Fish in a newspaper and came forward to identify Albert as a nervous old man that he saw in 1927 who was trying to quiet a little boy that was sitting with him on the trolley. Joseph Meehan, the retired motorman, watched the two carefully. The little boy, who didn't have a jacket or a coat, was crying for his mother continuously and had to be dragged by the old man off of the trolley. The little boy, as it turned out, was the kidnapped Billy Gaffney. Ultimately, Fish did confess to the unspeakable things he did to Billy Gaffney. Do you want to read those, Xavier? Because you're good at this. Picture 18, sir.
Which note are we on?
Picture 18. Back to Billy Gaffney.
Picture 18.
And you'll see paragraph 2, ultimately Fish.
Ultimately, Fish did confess to the unspeakable things he did to Billy Gaffney.
All right, listen to this.
I brought him to Rikers Avenue dumps. There is a house that stands alone. No, not far from where I took him. Took the boys there, stripped him naked and tied him to his hands and feet, his mouth from ear to ear, gouged out his eyes. He was dead then. I stuck the knife in his belly and hid my mouth in his body and drank his blood.
What?
I picked up 4 potato sacks and gathered piles of stones. Then I cut him up. I had to grip with me. I put his nose, ears, and a few slices of his belly in the grip, and then I cut him through the middle of his body, just below the belly button. Then through his legs, about 2 inches below his behind. I put in my grip and lots of paper. I cut off his head, feet, and arms, and the hands and legs below his knees. Then I put sacks of weights with stones, tied the ends up, and threw him into the pools of slimy water that you will see all along the road going to North Beach.
Okay. Yeah, so there you go. Billy Gaffney. Thank you, Trinity Jean. We appreciate you listening to our fucking horrendous story today. Okay, so this guy named Frederick Wertham, who was a doctor, and he was known as one of the earliest alienists of the time. And as you may or may not know, alienists, which is a fantastic name for people today who would be, I guess, like forensic scientists and stuff like that, who at that time did the best they could with blood analysis, and even though they didn't have DNA, they were able to kind of infer things from the scenes of the crime and how things looked. So yeah, let me just give you a little bit more on Billy Gaffney before we get to this. During his interviews with police, Fish further confessed, "I came home with my meat. I had the front of his body I liked best, his monkey and Pee-wee, and nice little fat behind to roast in the oven and eat. I made a stew out of his ears, nose, pieces of his face, and his belly. I put onions, carrots, turnips, celery, basically a mirepoix, salt and pepper, and it was good. Then I split the cheeks of his behind open, cut off his monkey and Pee-wee, and washed them first. I put strips of bacon on each cheek of his behind and put them in the oven. Then I picked 4 onions, and when the meat had roasted for about a quarter of an hour. Doesn't seem like enough time compared to your rib recipe, Xavier. Not for nothing.
Generally, it's 50 minutes a pound for at 350 degrees. It's a good rule of thumb when cooking a human being.
Would that be wrapped in foil?
It depends.
I would
mean,
think so. Yeah, right.
If you want meat off the bones, you definitely want
Falling
to
off the
up
bones,
For,
exactly.
slow cook it for 4 hours is generally the rule.
That is the rule, and I've done that in the past.
Yes.
I poured about a pint of water over it for gravy and put in the onions. At frequent intervals, I basted his behind with a wooden spoon so the meat would be nice and juicy. In about 2 hours, he did the rule. He was right. In about 2 hours, it was nice and brown, cooked through. I never ate any roast turkey that tasted as good and as sweet as fat little behind did. I ate every bit of the meat in about 4 days. His little monkey was as sweet as a nut, but his peewee I could not chew. I threw that in the toilet. Days later, a man from Staten Island came forward to identify Fish as the man who tried to lure his then 8-year-old daughter into the woods, not far from where Frances O'Donnell was murdered 3 days later in 1924. The girl, now in her late teens, saw him in his cell and recognized him. The gray man had finally been found. Fish was also tied to a 1932 murder of a 15-year-old girl named Mary O'Connor in Far Rockaway. The girl's mauled body was found in some woods close to a house that Fish had been painting. With all these indictments in different counties, there was very little chance that Albert Fish was going to be acquitted. His only opportunity was to beat the death penalty was to have the alienist or forensic psychiatrist declare him insane, which is actually what he wanted. The monkey, it was like his pee-pee and his ballies or whatever. I don't know which one was which here, but you
Beans
have to...
and Franks. Beans and Franks.
Shock the monkey. God damn it. So then in came Dr. Frederick Wertham. He had a book called The Show of Violence, and it described his first meeting with Albert Fish in his jail cell. He was shocked at how meek, gentle, benevolent, and polite Fish was. If you wanted someone to entrust your children to, this would be the person that you would choose. Fish's attitude towards the situation was one of complete detachment. I have no particular desire to live. I have no particular desire to be killed. It's a matter of no indifference to me. I don't think I'm right. When he asked him if he thought he was insane, he said, "Nah, not exactly. I could never understand myself." So psychosis basically was in Fish's family history. One paternal uncle suffered from religious psychoses and died in a state hospital. His half-brother died in a state hospital. His younger brother was feeble-minded and died of hydrocephalitis. Hydrocephalus. His mother was held to be very queer and said to hear and see things. His paternal aunt was considered completely crazy. His brother suffered from chronic alcoholism. His sister had some sort of mental affliction. How is this different than any of our families, to be honest with you? He claimed that his real name was Hamilton Fish, named after a distant relative who was President Grant's Secretary of State. He was tired of being teased with that name, and that's why he chose Albert instead. When he was 26, he married this young woman. He had the 6 children. Subsequently, he married 3 other times, although they were not legal, since he had never been divorced from his first wife after she left him. So,
did we skip over the fact that he claimed, his children never said that he did anything weird with them.
We're going to get to that in the testimony section.
Oh.
So, yeah. So, if you want to continue with Dr. Wertham and what he found, the most shocking thing that could ever possibly be said about Albert Fish is what you're seeing right here, right now. So Fish basically said that he really enjoyed hurting himself, and what he would do is he would take cotton and saturate it with alcohol, insert it into his rectum, and then set fire to it. And he would also do that to some of his children victims. He confided that he had a long history of preying on children, and he said that he had at least 100 of them, and he would lure them with money or candy. He usually chose African-American children because he thought that police didn't pay attention to them and didn't really care whether they were hurt or missing. He also never went back to the same neighborhood twice. He said that he lived in at least 23 states, and in each one he had killed at least one child, sometimes more. Sometimes he would lose his job as a painter because they would be a little bit suspicious of him, and try and connect him to some dead or mutilated children. He also liked to write obscene letters, and he would fantasize and daydream about things that he wanted to do to children, and he would write letters to like random women to let them know that that's what he wanted to do to their children. So clearly the doctor thought he was lying to him. They're like, nobody could be this much of a fucking animal. Then Fish told him basically that he had been sticking needles into his body for years and years, and the area that he particularly liked to do it in was between his rectum and his scrotum. He told of doing it to other people too, especially children, and he would put the needles in and then he would pull them out again.
Yes, that is an X-ray.
Yeah. So the doctors x-rayed him, and sure enough, there were at least 29 needles in his pelvic region. And what would happen is he would put them into his body, basically where his taint was it. They would he would put them in his taint. And a lot of times he would lose them. He couldn't pull them back out. And they would just wind up working their way into his body like that.
What a freak.
Yeah. Fucking freak. Yeah, this is actually
Because I'm not really talking Steve L.
Jason.
How's that for you, buddy?
Well, yeah, there you go. Thank you, Xavier. Just you be you. Yeah. So he was ecstatic with being able to finally tell somebody that these are the things that he was doing to himself. And the big question was he insane? Was he not? Who knows? So why don't you take it from here, baby, and let them know about what the kids said about him.
His children? Well, his children said he was a good dad, except for the fact that he would, on occasion, have them spank him with a wooden paddle that had nails driven through it.
Yeah, there you go. That's the paddle. That's the actual paddle.
So,
That's the actual paddle right there.
The old nails in the hiney trick.
Can you imagine, you're working down in your garage, and you're like, Dad, what are you doing with the spoon? It's like, that's for the soup.
The fact that he named her Gertrude to begin with should have been the first clue that bad things were coming. Bad things were on the horizon, Gertrude. Hey, Gertrude, you didn't eat your porridge last night? Guess what you got to do? Go get the old wooden nail brush and spank Daddy's butt until it's bloody.
Yeah, Fish's children had seen him hitting himself on his body with a nail-studded paddle until he was covered with blood. They also saw him stand alone on a hill with his hands raised, saying, "I am Christ." Fish told them what I did must have been right, or an angel would have stopped me, just as an angel stopped Abraham in the Bible from sacrificing his son. So, yeah, Wertham definitely believed that Fish was fucking insane. And he did want him to be listed as such. What, babe? What were you going to say?
I don't think he was insane. He was just a psychotic, crazy fucker.
Yeah.
Because he committed so many murders, and insane person would have been caught because they would have just been blabbering about it. He was very meticulous about his little plans of how to, snuff out little lives back then. So there's no way that guy was insane.
But babe, he ate booty. I mean, how can you not be insane? Anybody who eats flesh is insane.
Have you ever been to the South and tried pig's feet?
No. No. Ew, no. Have you? No.
No.
You would never eat that shit. I know
how
you.
How about escargot?
Okay, I like escargot.
There you go.
I could eat that.
There's a fine line between escargot and little Timmy's behind.
That's disgusting. So I really like this picture of Albert Fish. I mean, like, it's a really terrible word, but what happened is all the pictures of Fish, obviously, since it was from the 30s, were in black and white, and a couple of people on Reddit decided to recolor them so that you could see actually what he looked like. And, this is like a unassuming old man. You would never think of him as being the person that would, torment, torture, murder and subsequently eat your fucking child.
I don't know.
You know?
He's pretty creepy looking to me.
Yes, but in color, he's not really quite that bad. I don't really know. So anyway, so here goes Albert Fish off to trial.
He looks like a young John
And,
Williams.
what, baby?
He looks like a young John Williams.
Yes. So, to further demonstrate Fish's strange behavior, Dempsey called to the stand a woman who had received several of his obscene letters.
Tiger Lily.
What?
I was reading what Tiger Lily's wrote.
Oh, I had to buy
wrote,
pig's
and-
feet every week
And it's disgusted me.
when I took care of
Anyway,
my
back to eating children.
Sorry to hear that. Did you ever eat it, Tiger Lily? Just curious. And I want to know what it tastes like. Okay. The courtroom was cleared of women as Dempsey read the obscene correspondence. Another defense witness was Mary Nichols, Fish's 17-year-old stepdaughter. She described how Fish taught her and her brothers and sisters a game. He went into his room and had a little pair of trunks, brown trunks, that he put on. He put those on and came out into the front room. He got down on his hands and knees and had a paint stick that he stirred paint with. He would give the stick to one of us, and then he would get down on his hands and knees, and he would sit on his back, one at a time, with our back facing him, and then he would put up so many fingers, and he would ask us to tell him how many fingers he had up, and if he guessed right, which we never did when we weren't supposed to, actually, we were to hit him. Sometimes he would even say more fingers than we really had, and if we never guessed right, we would hit him with as many fingers as he would have up. Sometimes a hairbrush was used instead of a paint stick. He also stuck pins under his fingernails in front of the children.
Oh, Jesus Christ. How long is this podcast? I can't take it.
I know, it's so disgusting.
Oh, my God.
This is another colorized photo of him at his trial.
By the way, I like that in both photos, it's the same dude posing with the picture. Make sure
That's
you take
his
my
lawyer.
good side, say?
Yeah, that's his.
Yeah,
Say.
yeah.
Say.
Don't give me the business.
Well, try. The trial lasted 10 days, and the jury took less than an hour to reach its verdict. We find the defendant guilty as charged, the foreman said. Fish was not happy with the verdict, but the prospect of being electrocuted definitely appealed to him. And he basically, okay, there's the electric chair as it stood in Sing Sing. And this is what Albert Fish said at the time. What a thrill that will be to have to die in the electric chair. It will be the supreme thrill, the only one I haven't tried. And you know this motherfucker got a hard on just thinking about. Yeah, totally right, David C. He looks like a 10-year-old could beat the shit out of him. You're absolutely right. Dorian Morgan does Fish have an OnlyFans.
At least the hair's gone. You think he had a grandpa style? Because he looked like a dark hair back then.
Fish thanked the judge for his sentence of death by electrocution. Sing Sing prison was Albert Fish's next stop, and he wouldn't be there long. So they convicted him in, I don't even see what the date was. I think it was like December, and January 16th was when they were doing the execution. So yeah, less than okay, so here, let's take a look at all of that while we're here.
He looks like Howard with a better nose.
He doesn't have Grandpa Saul hair, though.
He does
So
not.
this is basically what the electrocution chair looked like in Sing Sing, and there's our lovely little Mr. Albert Fish as he's going to the electric chair. And a little fun fact was that I was just telling Xavier this, and of course he knew it already, but the electric chair was invented in 1887 by one of the employees of Thomas Edison. And what was it you were telling me about the currency? The current?
Oh, back then there was it's kind of like VHS versus beta. You had AC, alternating current and direct current DC. And I believe that Edison was the AC guy and Tesla was the DC guy, I believe. Anyway, when they designed the electric chair, they made sure that they used DC so not besmirch the good reputation of alternating current AC.
So, okay, this was the supreme thrill of his life. Hands clasped in prayer, he lowered himself into the chair and allowed the straps to be adjusted around his arms, leg, and torso. His face looked very pale. The instant before, Robert Elliott, the gaunt, gray-haired executioner, slipped the black death mask over it.
Oh, thank you, Cindy
the
Lou.
leather,
I had it the
the
other way
leather
around.
cap. What, babe?
No, I had it the other way around. Cindy Lou Who corrected me. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Sin. The leather cap with its electrode was fitted into the old man's close-shaven head. After fastening the chin strap, Elliot stopped to secure the second electrode to Fish's right leg beneath the trouser slit. Then he stepped forward to the control panel. Albert Fish's last words were reportedly, "I don't even know why I'm here." Part of the legend surrounding the demise of the real-life model for Hannibal Lechter happened at the moment of his death. The needles that were part of his body were claimed to have short-circuited the first effort to end his life. So they had to do it once again after they gave him the first shock to his body. Because he was just full of
Do you know how
fucking-
that works? They essentially
No.
put one electrode at the cap that's on top of his head.
Okay.
And then they put the other electrode at one of his legs. So the current will go from his head all the way through his body, exit through the leg.
Yeah.
So that's how they...
Didn't you tell me one time you got a little zapification doing some
I did.
horrible
I've
electrical work in your house?
I've done so much electrical work that I've gotten zapped a few times. It's never fun. Never fun. Like, oh, got time to go change the old trousers.
Can you imagine what it must be like to actually be fucking zapped like this dude was? Jesus Christ.
No, I can't. I really can't.
But you can see how Hannibal Lecter was kind of based on him a little bit. You know, this is a guy who.
Wow, look, that's quite the freeze frame.
Oh, that's
right
a nice little stop there.
Yes.
Yeah. So 1109, Fish was dead. There is nothing Hannibal Lecter could have ever done on screen that would have been as bad as Albert Fish.
No,
did
he's
in real life.
completely a very muted version of this guy.
Yeah. I'm sure he had a hard on while this was fucking happening. You know,
think
this
so?
is his ultimate
Apparently,
torture. Absolutely.
when right before they sat him down, he's had his hands clasped like if he was doing a prayer, and so if he was all that, cavalier about his own death, he wouldn't have been praying or been all gaunt.
I don't think that he was praying. I think that he was just
don't think so?
clasping his hands in
think so?
anticipation for the ultimate fucking high for a sadomasochist like himself.
Yeah, well,
It's a delicious thing for him. Let's just
they
run
should have.
through.
They should have like roasted him and fed him to orphans.
Yeah, but would that have really been right to do? You know, I mean,
Yeah, yes.
I'd rather have some scrambled eggs than have some fucking fish. I mean, really, let's be honest. Albert Fish had many disgusting fetishes. Here's the list of things that Albert Fish was known for. Okay? Corpophagia, which is the consumption of feces. Urolagnia, which is drinking urine. Infibulation, which is suturing the foreskin. Sadomasochism, flagellation, which is getting whipped or beat, castration, cutting of the male or female genitals, self-castration, exhibitionism, which are obviously exposing naked parts to the public, voyeurism, pedophilia, penicitio, which is referring to fellatio, I don't know what it means, fellatio, cunnilingus, analingus, fetishism, hypereroticism, and cannibalism. So he absolutely goes down in history as quite possibly one of the absolute worst despicable human beings that we know of, because remember, this is like the 1930s, so it was sensational journalism at the time. I'm sure there were monsters like him in the past that we'll never find out about, and I'm sure there's monsters like him that exist as we speak. There's so many missing people on the planet, and certainly in America, that we'll never find out about. So monsters like this, is Jeffrey Dahmer any better or worse than him? Is it any different? Yeah, sure, this guy like kids, but the reality is it's just as heinous to be a Jeffrey Dahmer as it is to be an Albert Fish. It's just that this man was proud of what he did. He was, readily admitted to what had occurred. And, most people say that there were probably hundreds of children that he did this to, and you would never know about it because, nobody really looked for those poor little kids that were either mentally retarded or African American. And
And he had a
yeah.
propensity to keep them alive for a while. So it's not like he would just end them all really quick. He took great pleasure in keeping them alive for days before he finished them off. I can't imagine anything worse if you're a kid, like just being fucking raped and tortured by some ghoul.
Ghoul. Brutal fucking man. I'm happy that, some people deserve that quick death. I would have preferred them just pouring honey all over his body and let him be eaten by like fucking, rabid rats in a fucking cell, and just, have him torturously screaming, although he might have enjoyed it, but something
Probably
like
would've.
that I think would have made me feel better about his death.
They would have
It was
found him in a
almost too
cell
soon.
twisting his nipples as the rats eat him.
Exactly. Doing
Purple
the Billy
nipple.
Madison nipple. So yeah, there you go. That is the story of Hamilton Albert Fish. So sorry, I didn't know anything about him. I had never heard of him until we decided to do this podcast. And Chris, that's the reason we decided to do it, because I was kind of fascinated with these kind of old school criminals that were as heinous as anything you could possibly find today, possibly even worse, and their ability to have absolutely no, what's the word I'm looking for, babe, about people who have like no empathy and no emotion
It's
and
a
no.
sociopaths, complete, and other sociopaths unable to empathize with anybody suffering, and worse yet, deriving pleasure from it. It's like sadisty as its worst form.
Yeah, really, it's just disgusting human beings. So yeah, we'd love for you guys to join us on radiogunk.com in the forum section. If there's somebody that you want us to look into and do a deep dive on, we'd be more than happy to do it. I know some of the people that we did were a little bit known to you, and some of them maybe not so known to you. But what we're trying to do is just kind of do like deep dives into the minds of madness and who these people are. My mother-in-law. So yeah, see, so there are a lot of people who didn't know who this guy was, and yeah, I didn't either. So I I want to deep dive on Xavier's
You're
workshop.
sick,
Oh,
Tiger.
his happy place full of trinkets from hell.
Yes.
You guys don't even know what goes on at Xavier's house. It's really just he's gearing up for his favorite holiday of the year, where he gets to shine with his like creeptastic fucking array of.
Whatever happened to my Transylvania twist?
Okay, so yeah, absolutely. Give us some ideas on people that you'd like us to do. I don't even know who H.H. Holmes is. Who is that? I'm more than happy to do this. I love murder podcasts and I love crime stories and stuff like that. But sometimes we just like to do things where it's not just a podcast. You have you have a visual to associate with the person, and get an idea as to what it is. Because every time I listen to a podcast about somebody who's missing or who's dead or whatever, as soon as I'm done with the podcast, I'm Googling to see who they were and, what the story is about them and how long they've been missing and what their family looks like and all that other shit. So that's kind of what we're trying to do with this show.
What we're really trying to do is have fun. This is really ghoulishly entertaining to do these little podcasts.
Totally.
It's man, it makes you feel like, oh man, maybe my old man wasn't so bad.
Maybe my
essentially-
sister really didn't try to torture me with pins in my
It's,
anus. It's a good thing.
I know.
She
Yeah,
may
so,
beat
yeah,
the shit out of me, but
so,
she didn't
like
try
the
to
common
torture me.
theme of this, we're just enjoying doing this and having fun with it, and hopefully we entertain a couple people along the way.
Yeah, and what we're trying to do with this is like at some point we will divert it from the stern animal and make it into its own little thing. We do have some other ideas for other podcasts that we'd really like to do. And we're looking forward to doing that too. Completely divergent from what we're talking about now, and completely divergent from the stern thing. So yeah. Oh, I've heard of Devil in the White City. I would actually like to read that.
Did I really say what?
Did you really say what? G Canada.
What did I say?
I don't know what you said. I don't really know. Chris Delapoulos, I'm hoping I'm saying that right. Do you know Colonel Russell Williams, Canadian Air Force head who broke into 80 girls' homes and wore their panties and took pictures? He then raped and then killed them. You would have great photos. All right, well, I will look into that. I don't really know what that question was, to be honest with you. Yeah. Just to clarify, when Papa refers to fat ass, Papa ain't referring to taint or something yuck or tiki. Papa is referring to Artie. Oh, let's guess if that's Papa Wrinkles right now. Dang, Dark Murky Miller.
Oh my God, we should do a deep dive on him.
I would kill to do that. You know, literally when he first came onto our website, I asked him if he would come on and let me do a one-on-one with him. He's like, no, you don't want me on there, Mo. You just don't want me on there.
My dad wasn't
G
so
Canada
bad.
was asking if your dad was bad.
He put out his cigarettes on my forehead a couple of times. But other than
Oh, babe, no.
come on.
No. H.H. Holmes is interesting, says Trinity Jean. There's another cool story about a home for unwed women that stole the babies and killed some mothers, I believe, up in Canada way back, too. All right, well, yeah, maybe we'll just get into Canada a little bit and see what goes on there.
The truth is, if we decided to do a podcast every single day, we wouldn't run out of material. That's how fucked up the world has been.
You know,
There's
Xavier and I
so
talk
many.
to each other literally for like an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours every single day about just how fucked up the world is. And, you know, we always think of things that is a never ending point of amusement for us, as a matter of fact.
Yeah.
So that's it. Okay, so I think we're done now, sir.
Thank you for joining us, guys. And
Yeah.
good luck to Tiger Lily's Pittsburgh Steelers tomorrow. Hopefully they won't shit the bed again.
It's Sunday already, isn't it? All right, yeah. So we'll be doing some Stern stuff next week. And then if you guys haven't listened to the Scores show, you probably really should, because there were a couple of good little revelations in that, one of them being that Chauncey said that Howard had impregnated a stripper over at Scores, and that's why he bought her a Mercedes. So that was kind of like an interesting thing. But yeah, so I know that has nothing to do with things that go gunk in the night, but I just thought I'd throw that out to you since most of you guys are here because of that anyway. And to, you know, and to see us. All right, so thank you, everybody.
Sorry, Tiger.
What'd you say? I hate the world. So join us at RioGunk.com in the forum section. And again,
Outro.
if there's anybody that you would like for us to look into, I'm more than happy to do deep dives into people that you think would be kind of
Yes, this is
interesting and
fun.
curious for us, because
This is fun.
this is fun. All right, Xavier. So I'll talk to you later.
Assalamu alaikum.
And yeah, let me do my little final thing, which is a little bit of a final outro. All right, guys, love you all, and thank you everybody for tonight. And Xavier, thank you, sweetheart, for coming on with me.
Thanks for hanging with us tonight. Please join us for any discussion at RadioGunk.com in the forum section. Follow us on Instagram or Twitter at Radio Gunk. And don't forget to like this and subscribe to us and hit that little